The rain fell in heavy sheets, splattering the concrete as a little boy stood trembling near the arrival's exit of Terminal B. He clutched a frayed backpack with both hands, lips quivering, his eyes darting from stranger to stranger. No one seemed to notice him. No announcements. No parents rushing through the doors. Just the hum of rolling suitcases and honking taxis. One cab pulled up to the curb, and a gruff-looking driver with silver hair and deep-set eyes stepped out. He was about to light a cigarette when he saw the boy. Something in the child's posture made the man stop mid-motion. He tossed the cigarette into a puddle and walked toward him. "Hey buddy, you all right? You waiting for someone?" The boy didn't speak, just shook his head. "You lost?" The boy nodded slowly. The driver's frown deepened, not from anger, but something old and buried resurfacing. "Come on, let's find someone to help." Inside the terminal, the driver led the boy past bustling families, suitcases stacked high, and flashing monitors listing arrivals. The boy clung to the man's coat, silent but trusting. Every few steps, the driver glanced down to check on him. At the information desk, a young attendant looked up, startled to see them. "Found him just outside," the driver said. "Alone, no parent in sight." Lloyd didn't look up. The attendant leaned over, her expression shifting to gentle concern. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" she asked softly. No answer. The boy squeezed tighter to the driver's coat. The attendant reached for the phone. "We'll make an announcement. Someone has to be looking for him." But the driver wasn't so sure. Something in the boy's eyes said this wasn't just a case of a missed pickup. The announcement rang out over the intercom, but no one came. Minutes ticked by. The boy sat on a plastic bench, legs swinging, his small figure hunched and still. The driver sat beside him, elbows on knees, glancing sideways. "You hungry, kid?" The boy looked at him, uncertain. "Come on. Let's get something warm in you," the driver said, standing up. They walked slowly to a nearby cafe, tucked between gift shops. The driver ordered soup and a grilled cheese. The boy picked at the bread, then took a small bite. "That's it, not bad, huh?" Still no words. But his chewing got faster. The man watched with a quiet patience, his eyes softening. There was something about this kid. Something painfully familiar. After the meal, the driver asked the attendant again, but no one had claimed the boy. No calls. No panic. Just silence. The airport police were notified, and a uniformed officer arrived, polite but mechanical. "We'll take it from here," he said. The boy's eyes widened in fear as the officer reached for his hand. He darted behind the driver. Hey, the driver said, turning. The officer paused. "Protocol," he explained. The driver knelt. "They just want to help, all right? I'll be close." The boy hesitated, then nodded, letting the officer lead him. The driver watched them go, heart suddenly heavy. He didn't know why this child meant something, but it was like he'd seen those eyes before, years ago. Hours passed. The driver couldn't leave. He paced outside the terminal, watching passengers come and go. Inside, the boy sat quietly in a waiting room beside the officer. But still, no one came. Finally, as twilight turned the glass walls violet, the attendant stepped outside. "They can't find a match. No reports. Nothing," she said. The driver looked past her into the room. "What happens now?" "Foster care. If no one claims him by tonight." The words hit harder than he expected. The man turned his eyes away. "No family? No hint where he's from?" She shook her head. He exhaled slowly, then without thinking he said, "I'll take him, just for the night. He shouldn't be alone again." The boy sat quietly in the back seat of the cab, wrapped in a blanket the driver kept for cold nights. Streetlights flickered past as the city slipped into darkness. The driver adjusted the rearview mirror, stealing glances at the boy. "You okay back there?" he asked softly. The boy nodded, eyes still cautious. They stopped at a modest apartment building, nestled between old brick structures. "Home sweet home," the driver said, forcing a smile. Inside, the apartment was small but warm, faint smell of coffee, old books on shelves, a worn recliner, and a faded photo of a young girl on the mantel. The boy stood at the threshold. "It's not much," the driver said, "but you'll be safe here." The boy stepped in, drawn to the photo. The driver noticed. "That's my daughter. Haven't seen her in years." The boy didn't reply, just looked at the picture like it whispered something familiar. The night was long. The boy couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, eyes wide open, flinching at every creak of the old building. The driver brewed tea in the kitchen, the kettle hissing softly. He brought a cup to the boy, setting it on the coffee table beside him. "You can't sleep either, huh?" No answer. The driver sat in the recliner, sighing. "Used to be quieter here, used to be louder too, when she was around." He glanced at the photo again. The boy finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "She looks nice." The driver's heart skipped. "She was. Still is, I hope." Silence stretched again, but it was different now, less empty. The driver leaned back, the recliner creaking. "You want to talk about your folks?" The boy shook his head. "Okay," the man replied gently, "not tonight." By morning the apartment smelled of eggs and toast. The boy sat at the table, shyly picking at breakfast while the driver sipped coffee. "You sleep at all?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "A little." The man nodded, content with that. "You've got a name, kid?" There was a pause. Then the boy said, "Eli." The driver smiled faintly. "Eli, that's a good name. I'm Ray." They shook hands across the table, and something shifted. Ray pulled out an old notepad. "Let's try something. You remember where you were going? What flight? What city?" Eli stared at the pad, then slowly drew something. A sun, a house, a woman with long hair. "That your mom?" Ray asked. Eli nodded. "Okay," Ray said, voice steady. "Let's find her." Ray drove Eli to the police station. "Just routine," he assured the boy. The station buzzed with calls and typing. A stern-faced officer met them. "We've circulated his photo. No hits yet. You sure he's not yours?" Ray's brow furrowed. "I just found him." The officer sighed, glancing at Eli. "Sometimes parents dump their kids and vanish. Happens more than you think." The boy recoiled, eyes wide. Ray stepped between them. "That's not what happened here." The officer shrugged. "We'll keep him for 48 hours. After that, if no one comes forward." Ray didn't let him finish. He looked at Eli, who was clinging to his sleeve. "I'm not leaving him." The officer raised a brow. "You willing to vouch for him?" Ray didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I am." Back at the apartment, Ray stared out the window as Eli colored quietly at the table. The city moved beyond the glass, indifferent. Ray reached for the photo on the mantel again, his daughter at age 10, laughing in the sun. He hadn't spoken to her in 15 years. Not since the divorce. Not since he failed to show up for her school recital. "I don't know what I'm doing," he murmured aloud. Eli looked up. "You're helping me." Ray turned. "Yeah, I guess I am." He sat beside Eli, watching him color a blue sky over the woman with long hair. "She'll come back," Eli said. "How do you know?" Ray asked. Eli smiled faintly. "Because you came back." That hit Ray like a hammer. He said nothing, only watched the boy, his heart pulling loose old knots. Ray didn't sleep that night. He sat in his recliner, staring at the phone on the side table, fingers tapping restlessly. Morning came gray and quiet. Eli had curled up under the blanket on the couch, peaceful for the first time. As dawn broke, Ray picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in over a decade. It rang. And rang. Then, a voicemail. "You've reached Ava. Leave it." Ray froze. Then ended the call. His hand trembled. He stepped into the kitchen, made coffee, and stared at the window. "Was that her?" Eli asked from behind. Ray nodded. "Didn't pick up." Eli climbed onto the counter stool. "Maybe she will next time." Ray managed a smile. "Maybe." but he wasn't sure. Regret had a habit of making second chances feel like fairy tales. Ray drove through neighborhoods he hadn't visited in years. Schools, parks, a bakery where he used to buy Ava her favorite chocolate croissant. Eli sat in the front seat, sketchpad in lap. "This your old town?" he asked. Ray nodded. "Yeah, too many ghosts though." He parked outside a school, engine running. "I used to wait here." She'd come running out, hair flying, backpack bouncing. Eli looked at the playground. "She was fast?" Ray smiled faintly. "Fastest thing in my world." The memory softened him. For a second, he wasn't a cab driver. He was a father again, full of promise. "I was scared to call her," Ray admitted. "Were you scared to see me too?" Ray looked at Eli, caught off guard. "Yeah, at first, but not anymore." Eli didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed. Back at the station, a woman stood at the counter, early 30s, hair disheveled, voice trembling. "I'm looking for my son. His name is Eli." The officer looked up, alert. "Where'd you last see him?" "At the airport. I turned around for 2 seconds. He was gone." "Wait here," the officer said. In the back room, Eli sat on a bench, coloring again. Ray stood nearby, talking with a social worker. The door opened. The woman rushed in. "Eli." He looked up. Then the crayon dropped. "Mom." They collided, arms tight, faces buried. She sobbed uncontrollably. Ray stepped back, swallowing emotion. The social worker looked at him, eyes soft. "I think you saved that kid's life." Ray didn't reply. He just watched, aching and grateful, all at once. Later that day, Ray stood beside his taxi, ready to drive away. Eli and his mother approached. She looked at Ray with gratitude too big for words. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there," she said. Ray nodded, hands in his jacket pockets. "Well, he's a good kid." Eli stepped forward. "You'll still call her?" Ray smiled, kneeling down. "I will." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny drawing, him and Ray holding hands. "For you," he said. Ray's throat tightened. He took the drawing like it was gold. "Thank you," he whispered. As they walked away, Ray looked up at the sky, clouds parting slightly. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. That evening, Ray sat in his apartment, the lights low. The drawing lay on the table in front of him. He picked up his phone again, stared at the contact, Ava. Then he dialed. This time, it rang only once. "Dad?" Ray froze. Her voice hadn't changed. "Yeah," he said, voice cracking. "It's me." Silence. Then, a breath. "I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from you again. I wasn't sure I deserved to call." "Well, you did." They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. When he hung up, Ray looked at the photo on the mantel again. "Maybe it's not too late," he murmured. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, the silence finally felt like peace. Ray returned to his usual taxi route, but everything felt different. Every fare, every stoplight, every silence in the car reminded him of Eli. He found himself glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting the boy to be there, wrapped in that old blanket. At a red light, he opened the glove compartment and pulled out the drawing Eli had given him. He kept it folded there now, a quiet talisman. A rider entered the cab and asked, "You all right, man?" Ray blinked. "Yeah, just thinking." The stranger studied him through the mirror. "You look like someone who's been through something." Ray gave a soft laugh. "Maybe I have." As they pulled away from the curb, the city lights blurred into streaks. For the first time in years, Ray wasn't just driving people around, he was searching for something of his own. That weekend, Ray parked outside a quiet suburban home. He hadn't told Ava he was coming, just that he wanted to try. He stepped out of the cab, gripping a small paper bag with pastries from her childhood bakery. The house was modest, with a tire swing in the yard and a flower bed in bloom. As he approached, the door opened. Ava stood there, arms crossed, unsure. Ray stopped at the steps. "I brought croissants," he said with an awkward smile. She almost laughed. "Almost. After 15 years you show up with pastries." He lowered his head. "I didn't know what else to bring." Ava's arms slowly dropped. "You brought yourself. That's something." She opened the door wider. Ray stepped inside for the first time in what felt like another life. They sat in the kitchen, years of silence thick between them. Ray looked around. Photos of Ava as a teen, a graduation cap, a younger version of her holding a baby. He paused on that one. "Your son?" Ava nodded. "Derek? He's 10 now." Ray's throat tightened. "I missed a lot." She didn't argue. "I was angry. Still am sometimes. But I know life can get messy." Ray leaned forward. "I didn't stop caring. I just didn't know how to show it anymore." Ava looked away, biting her lip. "Then show me now." She reached under the table and pulled out an old photo of her as a child, same one he kept on his mantle. "You gave me that day at the park. I kept it." Ray's eyes welled up. "You kept it?" She nodded. Ray offered to drive Ava and Derek to the park that Sunday. As they walked along the path, Derek ran ahead, chasing pigeons, laughter echoing. Ray sat on a bench watching them, his daughter and grandson. Ava sat beside him. "He doesn't know who you are yet," she said. Ray nodded. "He doesn't have to, not yet." She studied him. "Why now?" Ray looked at the boy running in circles. "Because a kid reminded me what it feels like to be needed." Ava smiled faintly. "Eli." He nodded. "He made me remember who I was, or who I could still be." Derek returned with a stick in hand, proudly showing it off. "Look what I found." Ray chuckled. "Best stick I've ever seen." It wasn't everything, but it was something. Later that evening, Ava handed Ray a piece of paper. "His mom wanted you to have this," she said. It was a note, written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you for finding me." There was a drawing, Ray, Eli, and a woman with long hair standing together under the sun. On the back, Ava had scribbled an address. "She lives nearby. They just moved. Said you could visit if you want." Ray held the note like it was sacred. He looked at Ava. "You sure?" She nodded. "We all need second chances." Ray smiled. "Maybe I'll bring some croissants." She laughed this time, really laughed. Ray folded the note and placed it next to the drawing in his jacket pocket. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not instant, not perfect, but honest. Ray parked his cab in front of a small apartment complex with peeling paint and flower pots on windowsills. He checked the address Ava had given him, then looked at himself in the mirror, brushed his hair, straightened his jacket. With a deep breath he climbed the stairs. Eli answered the door. His face lit up instantly. "Ray." The boy hugged him tightly, arms around his waist. Ray smiled, overwhelmed. Eli's mother appeared, surprised but smiling. "You found us." Ray nodded. Wasn't going to let the trail go cold. She opened the door wider. "Come in." The apartment was modest, lived in, warm, Eli grabbed Ray's hand. "I have something to show you." Ray followed, heart thudding, not from nerves, but from something he hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. Inside, Eli led Ray to a small table covered in papers and crayons. "I made a new picture," he said proudly. It was a detailed scene, him, his mother, and Ray sitting together at a dinner table under a bright sun. Ray studied it, touched. "That's me?" Eli nodded. "Your family now." Eli's mom looked on, her smile tinged with gratitude and something else, hope. "You've done more than I could ask," she said softly. Ray sat at the table, hands folded. "He did more for me than I did for him." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You showed up. That's everything." The three sat together, A quiet calm in the room. It wasn't conventional, but it was real. They spent the afternoon in the small park nearby. Eli ran between trees while Ray and his mother walked slowly along the path. "He's strong," Ray said. "Most kids would have broken." She nodded. "He had to be. His dad left a year ago. Since then, it's just been me and him." Ray looked down, processing. "You did good. He's got more heart than most grown men I've met." She glanced sideways. "You raised a daughter, right?" Ray nodded. "Didn't do it well. But I'm trying to be better now." She stopped. "That's more than most ever try." Across the park, Eli waved from the top of the jungle gym. "Watch me." Ray raised his hand. "I see you, champ." His voice cracked with pride. Back at the apartment, Eli showed Ray a small wooden box. "It's for my treasures," he said. Inside were pebbles, a toy car, a paper airplane, and at the top, Ray's original drawing of the two of them. Ray picked it up, his thumb brushing over the crayon lines. "You kept this?" Eli nodded. "It's my favorite." Ray swallowed hard. "You gave me that." Eli grinned. "But it still feels like yours." Eli's mother watched from the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, eyes shining. Ray looked at the boy and said, "You saved something in me, Eli, you know that." Eli shrugged, like it was the simplest truth in the world. "That's what family does." As the day ended, Ray stood at the door, ready to leave. Eli held his hand tightly. "Will you come back?" Ray nodded. "As long as I've got gas in the tank, you'll see me again." The boy grinned, holding up a small plastic keychain. "Then this is for your taxi. So you don't forget." Ray took it, blinking away tears. "Not a chance." Eli's mom stepped forward. "We'd love to have you over more. Maybe even for dinner next week." Ray hesitated, only for a second. "I'd like that." He stepped into the hallway as Eli waved wildly from the doorway. "Bye, Ray." As the door closed, Ray stood still for a moment. The hallway light buzzed faintly, but in his chest, something quiet and strong had reignited. Ray returned to his routine, but everything had changed. He still picked up fares, still listened to the radio as the city rolled by, but now there was laughter on his voicemail and crayon drawings in his glove compartment. Every Friday he drove to Ava's or Eli's. Sometimes both. One evening, a passenger noticed the keychain hanging from his rearview mirror. "Your kid give you that?" Ray smiled. "Something like that." The man nodded. "It's good to be remembered." Ray thought about that for a moment after the man left. Once he believed he'd already been forgotten. By Ava, by time. But now, people were waiting for him. Expecting him. And he wasn't about to disappoint them again. At Ava's house, Ray and Derek sat on the floor. A board game sprawled between them. Ava watched from the kitchen, heart full. "You're cheating," Derek laughed. "I'm just lucky," Ray grinned. Ava walked over and placed 2 mugs of cocoa on the table. "He's always been like that," she teased. Ray took a sip. "Some things never change." Derek leaned closer. "Are you really my grandpa?" Ray looked to Ava. She nodded. "Yeah, I am," Ray said softly. Derek studied him, then smiled. "Cool." It was such a simple word, but to Ray, it was everything. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't making up for the past. He was building something new. Later, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Ava sat beside Ray on the porch. The sounds of Derek playing in the yard filled the background. "I've been thinking," she said. "About the past?" Ray asked. "About what comes next," she replied. "You don't have to fix everything overnight, Dad. Just keep showing up." Ray nodded slowly. "I can do that." She reached over, resting her hand on his. "You already are." They sat in silence, the kind that wasn't empty, but full of what had been unspoken for too long. The porch light flicked on. Inside, Derek called out, "Are we watching a movie?" Ava smiled. Sounds like a plan. Ray stood, heart full. Let's go. At Eli's apartment the next day, he and Ray sat on the floor assembling a model airplane. Careful with the wings, Eli said seriously. This thing's got to fly straight. Ray chuckled. You planning on taking it across town? Maybe the world? Eli grinned. Eli's mom entered the room, wiping her hands. You too hungry? Always, Ray smiled. As they set the pieces down and moved to the table, Ray looked at Eli's mother. You've built a good home. She nodded, eyes meeting his. You helped us believe again. Ray looked at the boy. He did most of the work. Eli grinned, already halfway through a sandwich. Ray knew now, he hadn't rescued a boy at the airport. That boy had rescued him. That night, back home, Ray sat by the window with the city skyline glowing in the distance. He opened the wooden box Eli had gifted him weeks earlier. Inside were small mementos, photos, drawings, the keychain. He added something new. A photo Ava had given him of Derek, with a scribbled, "Grandpa," on the back. He looked at it, eyes soft. Then placed the lid gently back on. He stood and walked to the mantel, lighting a small candle next to Ava's childhood photo. For the first time in decades, the apartment didn't feel quiet out of loneliness, but from peace. Ray sat back, smiled to himself and whispered, "Thank you, Eli." Then he closed his eyes, letting the city breathe around him. Months passed, and life settled into something new. Ray was no longer just a taxi driver. He was a grandfather, a friend, and to Eli, something like a guardian angel. On a warm spring morning, he stood outside a small community center, holding a bag of donated books. Inside, Ava was organizing a reading event, and Eli was helping her set up chairs. Derek bounced a ball nearby, shouting playfully. "You always this early?" Ava asked as Ray walked in. "Old habits," he said, placing the bag on a table. "And excitement." She laughed. "You've changed." Ray smiled thoughtfully. "No, I think I just remembered who I was supposed to be." Ava gave him a quiet nod. "And you're doing it well." The reading event buzzed with chatter. Parents filled the seats, kids sprawled on colorful rugs. Ray sat with Eli and Derek, each boy leaning against his side. The featured reader, an older woman, began a story about a boy lost in a big world, and the man who helped him find his way home. As she read, Ray watched Eli's eyes light up, recognizing himself in the words. The boy nudged Ray and whispered, "That's just like us." Ray squeezed his hand. "Yeah, just like us." The crowd laughed at a funny line, but Ray barely heard it. His heart was too full. He wasn't a character in someone else's story anymore. He was writing his own, one page at a time, with them. After the event, Ray helped clean up. Eli carried folded blankets while Derek stacked books. Ray lingered near a bulletin board and saw a photo pinned to the top corner. It was of the night he first arrived at Ava's house. He didn't know anyone had taken it. He stared at it for a long time. Eli joined him. "That was a good night," he said. Ray nodded. "No. It changed everything." Eli leaned on him. "Do you ever think about the airport?" Ray turned to him. "All the time, me too," Eli said quietly. "But not in a bad way." Ray placed a hand on his shoulder. "Neither do I. Some moments start with fear. Others start with love. But the ones that change us forever, they start with both." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting a soft golden hue over the street. Ray stood beside his cab, Eli and Derek hugging him tightly, before running off to Ava's car. Ava paused beside Ray, keys in hand. "We've come a long way." Ray nodded, his eyes misty. "And we're just getting started." She reached into her purse and handed him a sealed envelope. "From me. Open it later." He raised an eyebrow, but accepted it. She smiled. "Drive safe." As they pulled away, Ray stepped into his taxi and opened the envelope. Inside was a photo of Ava, Derek, and Eli, together with the words written on the back, "You brought us home." Ray stared at it for a long time. That night, Ray placed the photo from Ava inside his wooden box. He looked around his apartment, no longer empty, no longer silent. On the mantel sat the candle, the drawings, and now the photo of a family he'd helped stitch together. He sat down, took a breath, and closed his eyes. A faint breeze from the open window brushed across his face. In the stillness, he smiled. He had no regrets. He had made peace with his past. And he had found something worth waking up for. The boy who was once lost had shown him how to be found. And Ray, without knowing, had found his way back to love.